Hey everybody, this is Jeff with the Embroidery Nerd, and I know some of you are tuning in tonight to see Jerry Lee, but she is not able to do her Facebook Live at the normally scheduled time, so I'm stepping in. And today I'm going to go over a little bit of 3D puff. I have a design that I've got set up that I'm going to go ahead and go through. So we can go ahead and start that. I'll just kind of go over some of the things that I look for when I do 3D puff and kind of the reasons why I do those things. And if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll be sure to circle back and take a look at them. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a design here in CorelDraw. It's famous 5.6. And for those of you that really like fonts, well, I can't remember what font this is. I had it, but I forgot. So we'll just go ahead and go. Actually, I think I can do undo here, and maybe I can tell you what font it is. Nope, one more undo. And there we go. Grand National Semi-Italic font is the one that we have. And when I was trying to bring this into Wilcom earlier, it was having problems with the bottom text, and it was actually shrinking it. So what I ended up having to do is I would convert it to curves, and then I would hit Control G on my keyboard to group it. And really all I'm doing is I'm just getting it into artwork form so that I can bring it into the software. The stuff that I'm going to be talking about today, it applies in any software. And so you can use the software that you have, and you should be able to not run into many issues. In the places that are kind of software specific, I'll talk about ways that I have worked around that in the past when I didn't have software that would allow me to do that feature. So here's hoping everybody can hear what I'm saying, because I said a lot, and we'll just go ahead and go from there. So I've got this grouped. I'm going to copy it, and this is one really cool thing I like about Wilcom is I can do something in Corel, and I can just copy it, and I can go ahead and just paste it right in. And I already had it in here once before, so let me delete that out. It won't let me delete it while it's hidden, and it really doesn't want to let me delete it that much, does it? So let's select it all, we'll delete it again, and we'll just paste this in. So I have this logo here. I'm going to do the bottom text here just regular. The top two numbers are going to be puff. Now, one of the things that I did it before I brought this on and before I came on live, and I'll go ahead and show you, is one of the things that I did is I measured everything. So let's select it all here because we can, and I'm going to change it to US measurements here for a second. And I'm going to explain to you where this is going and why I'm digitizing it the way that I am. So this is going to go on the front left. I'm holding my hands up. Front left quarter panel of a hat. So generally when I do these designs, I'm actually a little wide at 3.102 inches. I want to be at 3 inches. I am under 2 inches in height. A lot of, well, Ricoma machines, when they come from the factory, in their system parameters, they have it set up at a limitation of 2 inches. So when you go to do a hat design, you're stuck at 2 inches. Now, that is 2 inches of sewable space. So if you make a design 2 inches, you have to put it just perfect in there for you to be able to sew it. So what a lot of people do is they'll open up the parameters and give them a little bit more adjustment. But when I'm dealing with somebody that hasn't opened up their parameters yet, I make sure that my design is under 2 inches. I usually go like 1.9 is my barrier, but because of the scale of this, we're at 1.622, and so we're okay. And so now that I have my my scale and my design is the right size, which again I sized this before I came on, I'm going to go back to metric, and I'm going to grab my ruler tool. So one of the things that I always do is I measure everything. So I'm looking down here at the smaller text, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to measure my column width here. So my column width is about 1.9 millimeters, so I'm good to go ahead and use satins like I planned on. If that was thinner, you know, if we get down here under like 0.4, it gets tough to do. On a hat, it gets really hard to do like under 0.78 because you run into problems with your underlay wanting to stick out. And so I generally try to stay around 1 millimeter or greater for a satin stitch on a hat. So there are ways that you can get under that, but that's going to be beyond the scope of this video. So the next thing I'm going to do is I pulled up my measurement tool again. I'm going to measure my thinner bar on the 5. Now you can see I'm at 5.11 millimeters, which is good for puff. If you go thinner, the thinner you go, the less puff effect you're going to have, because the more tension is going to be on a smaller area of foam. So I like to stay over 4 millimeters when I do puff and under 10 millimeters. I kind of stretch. I will do larger satin stitches on hats up to 12 millimeters where the machine thinks that it's a jump. I will do that on hats, and the reason why is because a hat is not necessarily something that the front of the hat is going to get scraped against a lot of stuff. It's not necessarily going to get a lot of wear. So those are the things that I look at on a design before I even start. I make sure it's at the proper size, because I can't tell you it's horrible to digitize something and then realize you have to shrink it, and now all of a sudden your measurements are off and you can't digitize it the way you want it to. So I look at the size first, and then I do my measurements across my letters to make sure that everything's going to work. And now that we've done that, we can go ahead and digitize the design. So I'm going to use a run stitch, which is available in any software. You have the, as long as you have a digitizing suite, you can use a run stitch. You can do a fill stitch and you can do a satin stitch. And here we're going to be using run stitches and satin stitches. So I have my stitch length set at 2.5. My minimum length at 0.8, my cord gap at 5. Those you don't really need to pay too much attention to. Basically, in Wilcom software, when I go to turn a corner, it's going to make it a little bit thinner. So I digitized for my machine that sits behind me. And one of the things that I have to do when I start a design, because this is going on the front left panel, we're going to start on the left side and we're going to go to the right. If we were starting in the center of the hat, we would start right here and move our way this way, and then we'd come our way that way, or you can go that way and that way. It doesn't really matter, as long as you're going from the center out. But because I know the application and the placement, I can go ahead and digitize this from the left to the right. So this isn't going to be that big of a deal. If I want to go into the center, I can easily swap these letters around down here to make sure that it's going center out, and then I can move to the letters. So one of the things that I need to do is I need to manually digitize a center run underlay, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to come down to about the middle, and I'm going to come over here. So one of the things that my machine has a problem with is it has a problem with flagging. There is space between the needle plate. It is going to be recorded, Frank. It will be recorded. I'll probably upload it to the Embroidery Nerd website and to YouTube as well, so that you guys can go through the videos there. So before I got sidetracked, some days, and today has been a day so far. So I come up and I come down and then I come over, and what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that I'm pulling the stabilizer to the hat fabric, or the hat fabric down to the stabilizer. And in doing that, that's going to help make sure that my underlay of my actual satin stitch is going to stay underneath, or in between the middle of my satin here, so it doesn't poke out to the sides. So now I have selected my satin tool. I'm going to make sure that I'm on satin, and I'm going to leave it with my auto spacing. I'm actually going to turn that off. I'm going to put it at 0.35. I'm going to look at my underlay. I want a center run underlay at 1.5 millimeter stitch length, and I'm going to go with a zigzag, and I like to go down to like a 2 for my zigzag width. Now I have two options when I set this up. I can set it up now beforehand, and then every object that I digitize will have those settings, or I can digitize everything and then go back and change all the settings. So I find it's easier to do it beforehand, but if you don't, you can always go back and you can change that later on. So we'll go ahead and put down our first set of stitches. We are running red, and I kind of want to be, well, I'm going to leave it red for the video, and then I'm going to go back and change it to the color that I want it later, so that way you can see it on top of the stitches. So I'm going to come in, and I come in a little bit further. I want to say about 4 stitches to make sure that when this satin comes up and across, that I get that overlap. Now I'm going to go ahead and start down here at the bottom, And I'm going to start turning my corner a little bit early. I'm going to come here in the middle, and I'm going to right click. So I've been putting in corner nodes. I'm going to put in a curved, and I'm going to come to the right just a little bit, and I drop down. I want to make sure that everything stays where it needs to be, and I'll left click again, and then I'll just come out, and I'm holding down the control key in my software. Every software has a key that will lock you to an X or a Y axis. So I go ahead and hit enter, and now I have my first letter. So I'm going to switch back to my run stitch tool. I'm going to come up here, curve, and come down, and I'm going to do this little kick out right here first. So I'll go back to my satin tool, and I will come out, and again I'm making sure that I have a few stitches overlap, and now I can come here. So in some software you can, well, in all software you can pick your start point and your stop point of everything. And in some software, particularly this one, I can set it up to be a very specific, like I can set closest join. That was the word I was looking for. So I can set closest join, and I don't have to worry about my start and stop points because it's automatically going to move my start and stop points to the closest join to the next object. I am not a huge fan of that, and the reason why is sometimes when I'm digitizing, I want my tie off to be right here, and if my next object started just up a little bit, it would actually move my tie off to the center, and I want to have control over that, so I don't normally turn on my closest join. And if we look here, as you can see, I have these triangles. They stand for tie offs or trims, and my tie-ins are represented by circles. So you can see that I have, on the letter F, I have 2 trims, and the letter A, I have 2 trims as well. I will be going over how to change all that. I usually fix it all on the last, after I'm done digitizing. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do the M here. I'm going to cap the letters because that angle is too tight for me to turn. So I'm actually going to zoom in on the M a little bit here closer so that you can see. I'll hit enter, and I'm going to turn off my stitches so that we can see. I'm going to come right here where my last object was, and I'm going to come all the way across and then up to the top, and again right there, and I'll hit enter. And now I'm going to come there to there, and I'll just kind of repeat the process here for the remainder of this letter. So the reason why I'm turning off my letters is so that I can make sure that my objects line up. I'm going to go ahead and go there. Whoa, wrong button, too fast. So when I turn off the art and turn on the art, lost my train of thought. That's okay. We'll come across here. So my starts and my end points. My start point is always going to be where my first click is. So I'm coming right here on here. My last object ended right there. I left click to put in a corner node, and so that means my start point is going to be in that corner, and it's going to put my tie off up here. And so I'll have to go through and move my points around to make sure that I can go through this entire letter without any jumps or trims. From there and across. And again. And now we have 3 letters. We can go ahead and turn on our TrueView. And we'll come in. I'm going to do the O, and I'm going to slant my stitch angle just a little bit here. And I do want to start turning before I get into the corner because my corner, my turn on the outside is curved and on the inside it isn't. And so I need to make sure that I plan ahead so that it does, everything lines up. And I leave enough room inside for me to place the points out here for that curve. And come here and there. If you guys do have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I am keeping an eye on them. Do keep in mind that the comments are about 8 seconds behind what I say to what actually shows up in the comments section for me. So I'm going to make sure that I overlap them just a little bit to make sure that there's no gap as it comes around that corner and it's pushing. So we'll go ahead and move to the U here. Again, I'm leaving a little bit of space so I can put a third node in, a middle node, I guess. Come there. And to the top here. We'll go ahead and finish off here. As we get closer to actually starting the foam, I will start with a premise. The foam is something that I've noticed if you ask 3 different digitizers how to digitize for foam, you'll get about 5 different answers. It is something that is everybody kind of has their own style and their way to go about it, and there's no real one style. There's the way I like to do it and the way that I learned, but there are more than one ways to skin that cat when it comes to it. So we'll preface with that before we even get into it. But I do want you to know that there is more than one way to do puff foam, and I'm going to show you guys the way that I like to do it, and that's not necessarily the only way. So go ahead and finish off there, and now we have our letters, and I am going to make them all black. But first, before we do that, let's go ahead and we'll move our start-stop points. So I'm going to go into my node edit so that I can see my start-stop points there, and I can move them and make sure that my last stitch, this one ends here. I'm starting close enough that it's jumping it. It ends here, and I'm going to make sure that I move my start point over there as well. So we'll go ahead and come here. This one, this is something that I've noticed with Wilcom lately, is even though my start point is over here, it wants to start the letter in the middle. So I have to move my end point there to get that to work, and that was something that kind of drove me nuts for a while until I could find it. So again, we'll move that one to there. We'll come and move this one up to here. Make sure that we are flowing smoothly through the letter here. There we go, and then the rest don't need it. So you may have noticed that I only did this underlying stitch on the first couple of letters, and the main reason for that is I'm pulling my hat material to my stabilizer material, and it's going to be, as it slowly irons this out to the right hand side, it's going to be lifting this, the material and the stabilizer together as we move along to the right. And so that is why I only put it under the first few letters. And so we will just go ahead and keep on moving from there. So let's go ahead and bring in our art. And For the puff, I'm going to end up starting right here. I'm going to come around. I'm going to end here. And again, I'm going to start here, and I'm going to come around, and I'm going to end there. So one of the things that I need to make sure I'm doing is I need to make sure that I have a color change in there, or I put in a manual stop, so that the machine physically knows that it gives it a pause, so that I can come in here and I can put the foam down before I run the second part of this design. So I'm just going to do it with a color change. I'm going to select all of that, and I'm going to make sure it's black, and now we'll go ahead and digitize this red. So we're going to end up having open ends here, and so we're going to do what is called a cap. We're going to cap the ends, and basically we're going to take a satin stitch, we're going to come right up to the corner here, and I'm going to taper it in. So it's going to be a vertical satin, and I want to make sure that I'm coming long enough. I want to go about 4 millimeters, and that's something that I have found that works for me best. Again, we'll come in about 4 millimeters, and we'll put that satin down. But before I do that, I want to grab onto my run stitch, and I'm going to make my stitch length 4 millimeters, and I'm going to start a travel right here, and I'm going to run over. And I started up in this corner, so I'm going to run there. And basically what I'm using that for is I'm using that to kind of hold down the foam as I move along, and then I'm going to move into the satin. So let me go ahead and change their stitching order, and we'll move everything out of the way so that we can see it. And it looks like it's going to still do that weird thing that it's doing, and I'm not sure why it does that. Actually, I'm going to put that back where it was. And for foam, I don't want any underlay at all. So we're going to take out all of the underlay, and now we're not going to have that problem. So with foam, you don't really want any underlay. Basically, what we're doing is we're using the presser foot. It's going to be pounding down on the top of the foam, and we want to hit that the least amount of times, because every time it hits, it compresses the foam a little bit. So we want to use that the least amount of times that we can, having it hit the foam, which is why I'm only starting the tack down a little bit here, and then we're running into our satin. So I'm going to change my end point from right here to right here. And now I'm going to grab my satin tool. I'm going to come in here and make sure that all of my underlay is turned off. And my stitch spacing is at 0.35. Now 0.35 is not enough for to cut the foam, so I'm going to up that, but I'm going to up it later. Another thing that I'm going to do is, right now it all ends nicely on this line, and that is one of the reasons why I tapered it in, is because we're going to perforate a line right here. And so what's going to hold up our stitches on the side is going to be this little bit of foam and this little bit of foam. Another thing that you can do to offset that is you can feather one of the edges, so that not all of your stitch penetrations line up like that. Now, depending on your version of software, that depends on whether or not you have that available to you. But if you don't, make sure that you taper it in enough so that your stitch penetrations, you're still leaving a little bit along the edge to hold up your letter and not allow it to fall in there. So now we'll go ahead and start our satin. I'm going to turn off my TrueView again, and I'm going to start right here on the edge of the letter and come down. Now, I do want to make sure that I don't turn corners too hard or too tight. So I'm going to actually tell it that I want to start turning here, right there, and I'm going to end a little bit before and come down there, and again right in the corner to in the middle of that arc, and I'm going to come up a little bit more, and I'm going to end it right there. So now we will start our other corner here, and I'm going to come up into the middle of that little gap there, and again I'm going to come out just a little bit, and I dropped my point a little bit low, so I will reset that point. And now I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to do my corners like that, and I'm going to allow it to do short stitches. I just need to make sure that I look at my needle penetrations and make sure that they don't get too dense. So one of the things that can happen is if you turn too hard and too fast, you will get a lot of needle penetration. So if you notice here, we have these short stitches running right here, where it actually shortens up the throw of the satin stitch as it turns this corner. If I turn off the short stitch feature, what's going to happen is it's going to just try and cram all of these stitches right in here, and it's going to make the area way too dense, and I'm actually going to break needles on the hat. So we need to make sure that when we do turn tight corners, we leave on our shortened stitches, and if we don't, we need to make sure that our needle penetrations are not too many concentrated in a single area. Now, you may have noticed that I have made a mistake on this letter, and if not, I'm going to go ahead and tell you where it is. So I have a cap on this end, and I don't have a cap on this end. So I'm not perforating my foam right here along this edge, and so when I try to tear this off, it's not going to come off cleanly, and I'm going to have a large issue, and it's not going to look very good. So what I need to do is I need to fix that. So let's grab onto our sets of points. I'm going to come back a ways here, and I'm going to click, and now I'm going to select my two endpoints here, and I'm going to delete them, and that's going to bring back and give me a little bit of space right here. So I'm going to grab my run stitch tool, and I'm going to open it way up to like 8 millimeters. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to make sure that I can run a manual zigzag going across here, and it's not going to drop a stitch in the middle. And so this is just kind of the way I control that. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to turn on my stitches, and I'm going to drop a stitch right there if it'll let me. Drop a stitch right there, and I'm going to come across here, and I'm going to kind of do a manual zigzag stitch here, and we will go ahead and go right there, and we'll put it in. And as you can see now, I have my I don't have any drop stitches in the middle. I'm just walking basically over to the edge. So we will go back to my satin stitch, and let's go ahead and turn off that view, and I'm going to come in. Yeah, that works. As you can see, I'm making sure that my stitches here are going to be 3 to 4 millimeters. I don't want to put too short of a cap on the end, because if I do put too short of a cap on the end, what'll end up happening is it'll compress the foam right here, and it won't look even and smooth across the entire letter. So now that I have that, I'm actually going to I ended right there. So let's turn that off, and I'm going to jump from there to about right there. And now I'm going to grab my satin tool here, and I'm actually going to come in about, I'll come back an extra stitch here, and I will go ahead and set my first edge of my satin there, bring back my art, and now I'll bring it all the way to the end here. And so what we will end up with here is we have a nice flowing from this end to this end satin for 3D puff. So we can go ahead and start now on the 6, and I'm going to just grab that, and I will stop pushing my keyboard shortcut to dim the art. I do that a lot, and I'm not sure why, but I do it even a lot when I'm just digitizing on my own. So again, we're going to come back, and I'll put that there. I'm going to go ahead and change my stop point to right there before I even digitize the next section, so that I know that if I start here, I will come across there. And Wilcom's telling me stuff. So I will come across there and there to there. So I am zoomed in 1250 times. If I'm off the art just a little bit, nobody's really going to see it. It does drive me nuts though. So just keep that in mind when you get zooming in quite a bit. which is another reason why I like to measure my stuff before I digitize it, is as you zoom in and zoom out, you can start to lose kind of scale of what you're trying to do, and it can mess you up because you'll be trying to put, you know, every line right exactly where you want it, and then you go and you put it to stitches and you don't really see that. So you can do that how you like, though. This is kind of what works best for me, and so that's what I go with. The other thing I can do is I can actually digitize at a set scale, and I've done that before, where I go into a zoom factor, and it's usually 6:1, and I don't change that zoom factor the entire time I'm digitizing, and that keeps me kind of in the right perspective to make sure that my stitches don't go too close together, which can be more of a problem in some softwares, but in Wilcom they remove a lot of the short stitches, but if you really want to get really good detail, then you have to make sure that that's something that you're watching for. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do what I did on the last letter, and I'm going to go into my node edit tool here, and I'm going to come right about there, and I'm going to drop a set of nodes and I'm going to delete them. And the reason why I did that is because as it's moving from this stitch angle to this stitch angle, it's gradually going across. And if I drop in a set of nodes right there, then it automatically puts it at the stitch angle that was there before. And so it'll help make my transition look a little bit cleaner. So we've done that. Now we're going to make sure I have nothing selected, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to go ahead and walk back and forth across my letter. Now I have seen it where people will walk their do like a zigzag underlay under the entire letter, and I don't necessarily like to do that. I'm not saying that it's wrong, because it helps hold down the foam, but it's just not the way that I do it. So we'll go ahead and go there, and again I'm going to make sure that that's kind of straight. Go there. Now I'm going to move back to my run stitch tool, and I'm just going to step right over to there, and now we're going to go to our satin tool. I'm going to back up a stitch or two, and I will set down my points here. And now I'll come to the edge of my letter here. So now if we go ahead and go and look, we'll turn on the TrueView here so you can see it. Now you can see my short stitches here, and it's doing that because of the density, and again there and there and there, and that's just because I'm turning. Now again, if I did not have those turned on, I would have problems with these areas being too dense, and it would cause needle breaks. So now that I have done the entirety of the letter, I'm going to select all of my satin stitches, and I can do that over here in this window. And I'm going to leave my run stitches, and now I'm going to drop my density, and I like to do a 0.17 on my 3D puff foam. That's the density that I like. You can do like a 0.2. I've seen people go down to a 1.5. That is again something that is kind of preference. So I'll make sure that that is all correct, and we'll go ahead and watch this run. So we'll hit our slow redraw, and I do a slow redraw on everything before I stitch it out, because it helps me pick up large errors. So for instance, right now what I'm looking at as I go through all these letters is I'm looking for it to do a tie off, I'm looking for it to do a jump stitch, and I'm also making sure that all of my underlay is correct in how I want it. So that is one reason why why I do this. And now that I've moved on to the puff, again I'm looking for tie-offs, tie-ins, and making sure that everything is going to flow smoothly. So we'll go ahead and go through. We're going to come around there, turn the corner, and come to the end. Now you can see how when we got here, we started walking over to that, and then we come back across. And so we'll go ahead and watch as we come around this corner here, and again that corner. We're going to come around this corner here, and we're going to jump and do the end. So on the first part of this letter here, let's go ahead and make sure my art's hidden, and I'm going to go to TrueView. So on this part of the letter here, you can see that I staggered my stitches to make sure that I don't have too much of a cut line. So up here I did not. Now I am going to go ahead and I'm going to add those to that. I'm going to make sure that that is that way, but here I don't really need to because I've got this space right here to make sure that my stitches have something to stand on top of so that they don't fall down in a gap. I've capped both of these letters, but one thing that I haven't done is I haven't bridged anything. So I'll go ahead and make sure that I'm making the right edge jagged, and we'll come here and do the same thing. So I'll go over bridges really just kind of briefly here, but basically a bridge would be is I had this satin here come and intersect this satin here, like a normal 6. So what I would want to do in that case, if that satin came over here, is I would come about right here, and I'd cover both of my stitches and hit space, and then I would open that up to like a 0.5, 0.6 density. So I'm actually going to go to a 0.5. And what that does is it allows these stitches here that come this direction to sit on top of these stitches after this one perforates that line. So if you don't put in a bridge, what will happen is as this comes across and perforates, the edge stitches that are on the open end of the satin, they'll fall in to that hole, and you'll have just it'll kind of look like it's sinking right there. And so the way you counteract that is with a bridge, and that's basically what a bridge is. But I did not have it on this design because my 6 ended up being open with the font that was picked. So that pretty much concludes what I wanted to go over. I hope that this helped you guys. When you guys go to Digitize Puff, you can look at these tools in your software and kind of the things that I went through to make sure that your first tries become successful. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get ready to sign off. Before I do though, I want to talk about some extra resources that you can use to learn. So if you're interested in doing more about 3D Puff or digitizing 3D Puff and you're just kind of starting out, and even if you're not starting out, one of the things that I really I think very highly of, and I used it a lot when I started, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it over here into the window so you guys can see what I'm doing here. If you go to madeirausa.com/education, I Googled it just by Googling Madeira embroidery education, because apparently there's a town named Madeira, and if you just Google Madeira, you're not going to find it. But if you come here, Madeira has a lot of webinars, actually, and they have some instructional videos. We come down here, we have some webinars. This one was done by Eric Campbell. It's a great one. We have some on stabilizers, patches, and this is the one that I want to bring you right here, is this webinar right here. This was done by Eric Campbell. It is, I want to say it's an hour, maybe a little bit longer. Let's hit the play button. It's an hour and 20 minutes long, and he goes over stitch types, top stitching, perforation, angles, and underlay. It's really a great webinar, and it's one of the ones that I used when I was first learning. So if this webinar is also software agnostic, which is great, meaning that it does not cover how to do it in your software. It covers the theory behind it. So it's a really great resource for you guys to watch, and you can get kind of the theory behind and the reasons why we do what we do. And that's kind of, again, a thing that I did as well. But I'm taking a look over here. I don't see caps and planks are critical. Yes, sir, they are. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll probably end up doing another one next Monday night on something else. If you guys do have questions, circle back and drop them in the comments. Or if you are shy and don't want to do that, you can go ahead and send me a message, and I can try and address it there. But I do want to thank you guys for spending your time with me tonight, and I look forward to having another session with you guys later today.